There are many ways to go about recreating a radar motion trail. It's the trail of light that happens when the radar sweeps around this circular motion and it leaves this. See how it's brighter here and then it fades off and gets a little darker. Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that in Lightwave. We could just use an image of that gradient and just rotate it around. We could create this gradient in paint package. We could also create a 2-point polyline or just a thin piece of geometry and use lots of motion blur. But I thought we could take a look at setting it up if we didn't use a paint package or if we didn't use motion blur but wanted to give the same effect. And also by doing it this way we can explore a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different techniques. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down and we'll start by creating a flat object. So we'll go into box, in for numeric. We'll go ahead and reset it so that it's the default settings. And I'm going to just draw a quick flat plane here. And I'm going to give it lots of segments. So with the right arrow key on the keyboard, I'm just going to throw in a bunch of segments. It doesn't really matter how many. The more we have, the smoother the curve is going to be. But we'll just use, let's see what this is. This is 86. It really doesn't matter. Just throw as many in there as you'd like. Okay, with that set up, I'm going to go ahead and flip it so that we can see it here and we can see all the segments here. Let's go over to weight shade. Okay, and I'm going to create a quick gradient across here. So I'm going to head over to W for weight map, new, and let's call this radar. No initial value, create. I'm going to move over to the map tab, weights, in for numeric, and instead of the fall off being point, let's change it to linear. Okay, we can go ahead and close that. And I'm just going to right click and drag. The small end is 0, the big end is 100, and we're going to apply 100%. Okay, so now we can actually see it on our weight map. We've applied it. Now, just as a backup, because I didn't zoom in, I'm just going to grab these 2 points, go over to set map value, and I'm going to make sure there's 0. Okay, so there's 0, no doubt about it. We made sure of that. Let's go full screen here with this window, and I'm going to rotate this around to make a disk. But before I can do that, I'm going to crunch all of it down on the x-axis. So I'm going to hit V for set value, and on the X, 0. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. See how it's just one line? Can you see the blue line? That is all of that geometry crunched down to where it looks like, if we look, it looks like a 2-point poly. Okay, let's go back to full screen. And I'm going to use this. I'm going to copy and paste it to layer 2 because we're going to build 2 objects, 2 different ways of going about doing this. Okay, in layer 2, let's go over to modify, rotate, and instead of just rotating it like this, I'm going to come down here to modes and change it to origin. So it's going to rotate around the origin, even though that point right there that's made up of this geometry, that's on the origin. I'm just going to go ahead and just say let's rotate at the origin. So no matter where I put the cursor, it's going to rotate there. I'm also going to hit in for numeric, and for the fall off, which is normally set to none, I'm going to set it to weight map. And make sure that the weight map is selected down here, and if I left click, it's going to rotate the higher values more than the lower values. And I'm just going to type in -360, and let's apply that. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to apply it. I was showing you it rotating, and then it was that rotation plus -360. So I just want -360. Okay, let's take a look at what that did. Okay, what it did was it gave us a radial pattern for our gradient. Okay, 0, and it works its way to 100. Let's do the same thing to the original object, but this time let's do it as a morph. So I'm going to go to M, make a morph, and we'll just call this radar. And Y for rotate. It's still set to weight map. I'm going to undo that. N for numeric. Just make sure that I get it 100% at 360 degrees. And then while I'm here, I'm going to set this back to none, because I'll forget that I did it, and then I'll go to use rotate and think it's going to work the same way it always does, and it won't be working because I won't have a weight map. I'm also going to come back here to modes and change it back to mouse. That's where I like to leave it as a default. Okay, so if I come back to base, in layer 1 we've got what looks like a 2-point poly, and in layer 2 we've got our little flat circle here. Let's go ahead and save this off. File, save object as, and we'll just call this radar 001. Save. And let's send those over to layout. Okay. So we've got, I'm going to switch to the camera view, which is 6, and then I'm going to take layer 1. I'm just going to move it over here. Okay. Let's do a quick render just to see what we've got. So F9. And we're not really seeing much. It's just this dark gray circle. So over in the surface editor, we'll grab for the color, let's just pick this bright green. Luminosity, let's just crank that up. I'll do 200%. Advanced, let's do some glow. So I'm going to change the glow intensity. Let's just go 100%. We can always adjust that later. Now, in order for glow intensity to work, I need to go to Control F8, which is the processing tab, and enable glow. Okay, let's do a F9. We can see a little bit of a glow, and we're definitely seeing a bright green. Now we're not seeing the 2-point poly chain, or it's not really a 2-point poly chain. We're not seeing the other object, which is all collapsed, but we'll see that later when we start working with it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close this, and let's start texturing. So I'm going to go to Render Viper so we can get a good look at this. Do another render just so we can store it in the buffer. Render, normal. Okay, so we'll be able to see a little bit about what's going on with our surfacing. We'll come back over to basic, and we will go ahead and activate the nodes and go into the node editor. I'm going to grab that vertex map that we created. Go ahead and choose it, and let's plug that into transparency. We can already see it working here. So it's 100% transparent where the 100% weight map value was, and then it fades all the way to 0, which would be 0% transparent, 100% opaque. But we can further control this with a gradient. So I'm going to go over to gradient, add another key, make that white, white meaning 100%. We'll plug the weight map into there, and we'll plug the gradient into the transparency channel. And you can see here that it's a different setup. We're able to control this. I'm going to go ahead and take this gradient and adjust it, and we can see over here. So we can control how much of a trail we want as it rotates around. And if we want it to rotate around, we just take that disk and spin it, and we'll get a nice little rotation. So we could have our radar already set up, but maybe we want to dress it up, dress up the little radar motion trail, and we can do that a bunch of different ways. We don't have to use a different object, but I thought it'd be fun to take advantage of the other object. So let's just call this done for right now. We'll close this down. I'm going to move Viper out of the way, close this down, and take this one and just kind of move it out of the way. Let's grab what was in layer 1. Actually, I'm going to move this one pretty much off screen. Let's grab this one, P for properties, come over to the deform tab, and under add displacement we'll choose morph mixer. Double click, crank that over to 100, close that down, close this down, and we have what looks like to be the same object. It uses the same surface, so let's go ahead and do a render. Okay, looks pretty much the same. So what we'll do is dress this up a little bit with the texture. I'm going to bring Viper back over, and I'm going to open up the surface editor. Let's go ahead and do a render. Let's make sure that we're using the same object, because it could have looked like the same thing, and this might not have been updating. So I'll come over to Edit Nodes, and let's just change this up a little bit. I'm going to keep this here for right now, and we'll come over to, let's pick Marble. Okay, and I'm going to plug that into the color, and let's make that green. Okay, and let's size it up a little bit. I'm going to try 5 meters, see if that works. Okay, so we're getting light streaks. Let me do a render just so we can take a look at that. Okay, so now instead of a solid line, we're getting light streaks. Well, the reason why is if we look over at our texture here, Marble is going to create these bands, and because it's texturing it, it's just texturing a line because it's going to texture it before it morphs around into that disk. It's going to give us these streaks that can go all the way around. I can go in, and if I want to expand this, nothing stops me from going over to my gradient and lowering this key, and there we go. We get the light streaks going around. So depending on the type of look that you're going for, would depend on whether you just do a disk or if you want to do this little morph trick to get these nice little streaks. And remember, you don't even have to go this route. This is just one option if you don't want to load in an image. You could, if I just take this off and do a render, nothing stops you from creating something similar to this in a paint package, just doing a planar map right on the disk. I think we have a little more control, and we can animate it if we were to go in and do it this way. We can animate the amount of transparency, we can do all kind of stuff. And then all that's left to do, let's go ahead and shrink this a little bit. All that's left to do to call this done is to, let's close some of these windows down. Okay, let's just set that to 50% and close this up. Is take this object right here, and over time, let's just say over 20 frames, let's just say over 15 frames, Y for rotate, and in the bank do 360. Okay, and now you can see it could be rotating, and let's just go here. Okay, and it'll move around, and then you have brighter here, and then it'll fade off, just like you'd expect the radar motion trail to do.